Yesterday he was in Maldives, and this morning he's just landed in Colombo. He has met with Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, who received him at the airport. And these are live visuals from the St. Anthony's Church. This, remember, was one of the churches that was rocked with the bombings that had ripped through several buildings, 3 churches and also 3 to 4 hotels in Sri Lanka. And this is the Prime Minister there expressing his solidarity with the people who ended up losing their lives on that fateful Easter Sunday. So Prime Minister Narendra Modi there, accompanied by his Sri Lankan counterpart Ranil Wickremesinghe. He's at the St. Anthony's Church. This was one of those places that saw the horrific violence that unfolded as at least 6 bombs ripped through Sri Lanka on the 21st of April. Now, this was the scene where a lot of people ended up losing their lives. Now, the church service, of course, is back, but almost for over about 2 odd weeks, the churches had even suspended holding their Sunday Mass. And Prime Minister Narendra Modi is, of course, visiting the St. Anthony's Church today. He's meeting with the High Priest of the St. Anthony's Church and has expressed his solidarity with the people of Sri Lanka as a part of his visit. Remember, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in fact the first world leader to in fact be visiting Sri Lanka post the serial bombing that took place on Easter Sunday. And this, of course, is a message from India. And this being his first visit after having taken charge as the Prime Minister for a second straight term, Prime Minister Modi has made it abundantly clear that even as he reaches out and forges India's relationship with the big nations such as the United States, Russia, etc., he also will not undermine the close relationship that India has with its neighbouring nations. Neighbourhood first policy is what has been reiterated by the incumbent Prime Minister, and this is what is playing out in Prime Minister Narendra Modi's diplomatic push. And this, of course, is a visit, although symbolic in nature. This is a visit for the optics. This is a visit where Prime Minister Modi is expressing his solidarity with the people of Sri Lanka. What also is absolutely certain is that this is a visit that will cement the counter-terror cooperation between the two countries. This also is a visit that will cement the close security ties that the two countries enjoy. This being a part of the same region is extremely critical that the two nations, in fact, share their intelligence, which is what India had actually done prior to the Easter bombings. And this is a visit that will go on in many ways to cement and in many ways to strengthen the counter-terror and security cooperation between India and Sri Lanka. And we can also expect over the course of the next few months that there will be more visits between leaders of the two nations. Now, there are big changes that are expected in the Sri Lankan domestic political scenario. There was the obvious friction between the Prime Minister and the President there, where they were not seeing eye to eye on many of the issues, and even on cooperation and security matters, the Prime Minister and the President in Sri Lanka had not been on the same page. And now one expects that these differences will be ironed out. So the Prime Minister then being shown the various photographs and many other aspects in terms of what has since changed after the Easter bombings at the St. Anthony's Church. And this, of course, is the first place that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has visited since having landed in Colombo. And also, to add more perspective on this, I am joined by our Associate Editor for Foreign Affairs, Ramesh Ramachandran, who's joining us from New Delhi. Now, good afternoon to you, Ramesh. Now, this is a very significant and a symbolic visit by the Indian Prime Minister to Sri Lanka, where he's reiterating the long-standing relationship that India has with Sri Lanka, but at the same time sending out a very strong message that in his second term as the Prime Minister, he views the Sri Lankan relationship very, very crucially.
Indeed, Mohammed, as we watch these latest visuals coming in from Colombo, in particular the church, which was the scene of the attack on the 21st of April this year, when suspected terrorists bombed the church in addition to other locations across Sri Lanka. and it took a massive toll, and this was one of the worst attacks ever faced in Sri Lanka in recent memory. Now, to put things into context here, Mohammed, now this, as you've said, is part of Prime Minister Modi's neighbourhood first policy. Remember, it comes the day after he visited the Maldives on his first visit abroad in his second term in office. And yesterday, addressing the Maldivian legislature, the Majlis, he spoke about counter-terror cooperation. It's only fitting, therefore, that today, this morning, he has taken time, he has made time to actually visit a scene of a terrorist attack in Sri Lanka, and he will, as you correctly mentioned, it's high on symbolism and optics. But that said, it is a crucial issue for the Sri Lanka today, because remember, it's already taken a toll of the Defence Secretary, the Police Chief, and most recently, the Intelligence Chief as well. And we are given to understand that the President Sirisena has scuttled a parliamentary probe into the attack. So, all on balance, this is a highly important visit for India-Sri Lanka ties in the context of counter-terrorism cooperation as well.
Absolutely indeed. Now, the other thing that a lot of people would, of course, be looking at as Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Sri Lanka, because this was a brief stopover, is how it initially had been planned. But the way it is panning out, this does appear to be a very important and a significant visit. And this is a message, you know, it's the optics of it, where the Indian Prime Minister is meeting with his Sri Lankan counterpart. He's also expected to be hosted by the Sri Lankan President. He will also be meeting with the leaders of the opposition, Mahinda Rajapaksa, the former president, as well. Now, this is about sending out a message, perhaps even to China, that India is not willing to cede any turf in the island nation.
Indeed, Mohammed. Just to put things into context for our viewers here, Mohammed, this is Prime Minister Modi's third visit in 4 years. He first visited Sri Lanka in 2015. The second was in 2017. And today's visit is a third, as I said, in the last 4 years. Now, today, incidentally, marks the 50th day since the 21st April terror attacks in Sri Lanka. As I mentioned, this is highly symbolic on the part of Mr. Modi to travel to that church to show solidarity with the people and government of Sri Lanka. But that said, in the larger context of India's neighbourhood first policy, Sri Lanka is a linchpin or a key component element of India's neighbourhood first policy. Remember, Sri Lanka is the current chair of the BIMSTEC grouping, and India is in particular focusing on BIMSTEC at the expense of SAARC in recent years, especially in light of the intransigence of Pakistan in fomenting good ties with India. So clearly, the focus is on neighbourhood first and Act East. But that said, the domestic politics in Sri Lanka will also play a key role in Mr. Modi's engagement. Remember, he will meet with all cross-section of the Sri Lankan leadership, including, as you mentioned, Mr. Rajapaksa, the leader of opposition. But that said, Mr. Rajapaksa is not allowed to contest the next presidential election. We can see his brother contest instead. But that said, the rift between the president and prime minister is out in the open, and India will look to cement or to bridge those ties going forward. Remember, Sri Lanka had ignored India's intelligence alerts in the run-up to the April attacks, and that, to my mind, is one of the key things high on the priority agenda of Mr. Modi's meetings and discussions in Colombo today as we speak.
Absolutely indeed, Ramesh. That, of course, will be one of the key agendas as the Prime Minister is, of course, meeting with his Sri Lankan counterpart. Thank you very much indeed for joining us and giving us the perspective in terms